The morning air at Sandringham carried a crisp bite that made cheeks rosy and breath visible in small puffs. Princess Charlotte walked between her parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, her small gloved hand tucked securely in her mother's. The 9-year-old princess had grown taller over the past year, but she still looked tiny next to the adults surrounding her. Her navy blue coat was perfectly pressed, and her hair was neatly braided, though a few strands had already escaped to frame her face in the December wind. The traditional Christmas walk to St. Mary Magdalene Church was something Charlotte had done many times before, but this year felt different. She could sense the excitement in the crowd that had gathered along the path. People had traveled from far and wide to catch a glimpse of the royal family, and their cameras were ready to capture every moment. Charlotte had learned early that being a princess meant always being watched, but she had also learned that she could use that attention for good. As they walked, Charlotte noticed an elderly woman standing near the front of the crowd. The woman was leaning heavily on a walking stick, and her eyes were filled with tears. Charlotte had seen that look before during hospital visits and charity events. It was the look of someone who needed hope, someone who was carrying a heavy burden. Without thinking, Charlotte slowed her pace slightly, causing her mother to glance down at her with a questioning look. "Mummy," Charlotte whispered, tugging gently on her mother's hand. "The lady with the stick. She looks sad." Catherine followed her daughter's gaze and immediately understood. This was one of the moments that made her proud to be Charlotte's mother. Even at 9 years old, Charlotte had developed an incredible ability to notice when others were struggling. It was a gift that couldn't be taught, only nurtured. The crowd was larger than usual this year, stretching along the entire path from Sandringham House to the church. Security personnel moved quietly through the group, ensuring everyone stayed behind the designated barriers. Charlotte could hear the excited whispers as the royal family approached each section of well-wishers. Children pressed forward, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young princess they had seen in photographs and on television. "Your Royal Highness," called out a young girl who looked to be about Charlotte's age. "I love your coat." Charlotte smiled and gave a small wave, but her attention kept returning to the elderly woman. Something about her reminded Charlotte of her great-grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth, who had taught her that being royal meant serving others, especially those who needed comfort most. As they continued walking, Charlotte began to formulate a plan. She knew the protocol for royal walkabouts. They would greet certain pre-selected individuals, accept flowers and small gifts, and make their way to church for the Christmas service. But Charlotte had learned that sometimes the most important moments happened when you stepped outside the plan. Prince William walked beside his family, occasionally stopping to chat with members of the public. He watched his children carefully during these events, proud of how well they had adapted to royal life while still maintaining their childhood innocence. George, his eldest, walked with the serious demeanor of a future king, while Louis, the youngest, charmed everyone with his spontaneous reactions. But Charlotte had always been special in her ability to connect with people on an emotional level. The path to the church wound through beautiful grounds that had been in the royal family for generations. Ancient trees lined the walkway, their bare branches creating intricate patterns against the gray sky. Charlotte loved this place. It felt like home in a way that few places did. Here, she could be both a princess and a normal girl who loved to run through the gardens and climb trees when no one was watching. "Charlotte seems very thoughtful today," Catherine murmured to William as they walked. "She's been like that all morning," William replied. "I think she's planning something." They both knew their daughter well enough to recognize the signs. Charlotte was observant and caring, but she was also determined. When she set her mind to helping someone, nothing could stop her. The crowd grew thicker as they approached the church. Charlotte could see the stained glass windows glowing warmly in the distance, promising the comfort and peace that always came with Christmas services. But first, she had something important to do. As they drew closer to the section where the elderly woman stood, Charlotte began to slow down even more. She could see the woman more clearly now. She was probably in her 80s, with silver hair that was perfectly styled despite the wind. Her coat was old but well-maintained, and she clutched a small bouquet of flowers that looked homemade. Most importantly, Charlotte could see that the woman was struggling to stay standing, even with her walking stick. "Mummy," Charlotte said again, this time more urgently. "May I speak to that lady? Please?" Catherine looked ahead to where Charlotte was pointing and felt her heart swell with pride. This was exactly the kind of moment that defined what it meant to be royal. Not the glamorous events or the formal ceremonies, but the simple acts of human kindness that could change someone's entire day. Of course, darling, Catherine said softly. But, remember what we've talked about. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. Charlotte nodded seriously. She had learned this lesson many times over the years, watching her parents and grandparents interact with the public. She had seen how a simple smile or a few kind words could bring joy to someone who desperately needed it. Today, she wanted to be the one to provide that joy. The security team noticed the change in the family's direction and smoothly adjusted their positions. They were used to spontaneous moments during royal walkabouts, especially when the children were involved. These unplanned interactions often became the most memorable and meaningful parts of any public appearance. As they approached the elderly woman, Charlotte could see her face more clearly. The woman's eyes widened with surprise and delight as she realized the young princess was walking directly toward her. The tears that had been threatening to fall now spilled over, but they were tears of joy rather than sadness. "Good morning," Charlotte said in her clear, confident voice as she stopped in front of the woman. "I'm Charlotte. What's your name?" The woman looked stunned for a moment, unable to believe that Princess Charlotte was speaking directly to her. The crowd around them had fallen silent, everyone straining to hear the conversation. I'm Margaret," the woman stammered, her voice shaking with emotion. "Margaret Thompson. Your Royal Highness, I can't believe this is such an honor." Charlotte noticed that Margaret was trembling, and not just from the cold. The princess had attended enough royal events to recognize when someone was overwhelmed by emotion. She had also learned from watching her mother how to help people feel more comfortable in these situations. "It's very nice to meet you, Margaret," Charlotte said warmly. "Are you here with your family today?" Margaret's expression flickered with something that looked like pain before she composed herself again. "No, dear. I'm here alone today. My late husband and I used to come to these Christmas walks together every year. This is my first time coming without him." Charlotte felt her heart squeeze with sympathy. She understood loss, having experienced the death of her great-grandmother just a few years earlier. She knew how important it was to honor the memory of loved ones, especially during special occasions like Christmas. "I'm very sorry about your husband," Charlotte said with the kind of sincere compassion that surprised many adults. "What was his name?" "Arthur," Margaret replied, her voice growing stronger. "We were married for 58 years. He loved these Christmas walks. He always said the royal family represented the best of Britain, and he was so proud to be here each year." Charlotte could see that talking about Arthur was both painful and comforting for Margaret. She had learned from her great-grandmother that sometimes the best gift you could give someone was simply the opportunity to share memories of someone they loved. "Arthur sounds like he was a wonderful man," Charlotte said. "I think it's beautiful that you're here today, continuing the tradition you shared with him. I'm sure he would be very proud of you." Margaret's tears flowed freely now, but she was smiling through them. "Oh, my dear, you have no idea what this means to me. I almost didn't come today. I wasn't sure I could handle it without Arthur. But something told me I needed to be here." Charlotte looked at the small bouquet in Margaret's hands. The flowers were clearly homemade, probably from Margaret's own garden. They were simple but beautiful, tied together with a piece of ribbon that had seen better days. "Are those for the church?" Charlotte asked, nodding toward the flowers. Margaret looked down at the bouquet as if she had forgotten she was holding it. "Oh, these? No, I brought them hoping I might give them to someone in your family. Arthur always said that flowers from our garden should be shared with people who make the world brighter." Charlotte felt a warm glow spread through her chest. This was exactly the kind of moment that made all the formal protocol and public scrutiny worthwhile. Here was a woman who had suffered a tremendous loss but was still thinking about giving to others. It reminded Charlotte of all the lessons her parents and grandparents had taught her about service and kindness. "They're absolutely beautiful," Charlotte said, and she meant every word. "Would you like me to have them? I would be honored to carry them into church today." Margaret's eyes went wide with disbelief. You would do that? You would carry my flowers?" "Of course," Charlotte said simply. "They're perfect, and they're made with love. That makes them the most special flowers of all." As Margaret carefully placed the bouquet in Charlotte's hands, the crowd around them erupted in quiet murmurs of appreciation. Many people were wiping away tears, moved by the genuine kindness they were witnessing. This wasn't a staged photo opportunity or a calculated public relations moment. This was simply a young girl with a compassionate heart reaching out to someone who needed comfort. Charlotte accepted the flowers with both hands, treating them as if they were the most precious gift she had ever received. The bouquet was modest by royal standards, but Charlotte understood that its true value lay not in its appearance but in the love and hope that had gone into creating it. "Thank you so much, Margaret," Charlotte said. "These flowers will make our Christmas service even more special. And I want you to know that Arthur's memory is being honored today through your kindness." Margaret reached out with a shaking hand and gently touched Charlotte's arm. "Bless you, dear. You have such a beautiful heart. Your great-grandmother would be so proud of the young woman you're becoming." The mention of Queen Elizabeth brought a soft smile to Charlotte's face. She missed her great-grandmother terribly, but she knew that the late Queen's spirit lived on in moments like this. The Queen had taught her that being royal wasn't about crowns or castles, but about using your position to bring joy and comfort to others. "Thank you," Charlotte said quietly. "That means everything to me." As the conversation continued, Catherine and William watched with deep pride. They had always known that Charlotte was special, but moments like this confirmed that she truly understood what it meant to serve others. The princess was not just going through the motions of royal duty, she was genuinely connecting with people and making a real difference in their lives. The time had come to continue toward the church, but Charlotte wasn't quite ready to leave Margaret. She had an idea, one that might seem small to some people but would mean the world to a lonely widow spending her first Christmas without her beloved husband. "Margaret," Charlotte said thoughtfully, "would you like to walk with us to the church? I mean, if you're comfortable with that. I would love to hear more about Arthur and the Christmases you shared together." Margaret looked as though she might faint from shock and joy. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined that Princess Charlotte would invite her to walk alongside the royal family. The security team quickly conferred and made the necessary adjustments, understanding that this was exactly the kind of spontaneous kindness that made the royal family beloved by their people. Margaret accepted Charlotte's invitation with trembling hands and a heart full of gratitude. As they began walking together toward St. Mary Magdalene Church, the elderly woman found herself between Princess Charlotte and Princess Catherine, feeling as though she was living in a beautiful dream. The crowd watched in amazement as this unexpected friendship unfolded before their eyes. "Tell me about your favorite Christmas with Arthur," Charlotte said as they walked slowly, matching Margaret's pace perfectly. The young princess had noticed how carefully Margaret needed to move with her walking stick, and she naturally adjusted her stride without making Margaret feel self-conscious about slowing everyone down. Margaret's face lit up with the kind of joy that comes from being asked to share precious memories. "Oh, my dear, there were so many wonderful Christmases. But I think my favorite was probably our last one together, just this past year. We didn't know then that it would be our final Christmas, of course." Charlotte listened intently, her young face serious with concentration. She had learned from her great-grandmother that one of the greatest gifts you could give someone was your full attention, especially when they were sharing something important from their heart. "Arthur had been feeling quite poorly for months," Margaret continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "The doctors had told us his heart was failing, but he was determined to make that Christmas special. He spent weeks secretly working in the garage, building me a memory box filled with photographs and letters from our entire marriage." Catherine found herself deeply moved by Margaret's story. As a mother and wife, she could imagine how precious such a gift would be, especially knowing it might be the last one from a beloved partner. She exchanged a meaningful glance with William, both of them recognizing that their daughter was creating something truly special for this grieving woman. "That sounds incredibly thoughtful," Charlotte said softly. "Arthur must have loved you very much to put so much care into that gift, especially when he wasn't feeling well." "He did love me," Margaret replied, tears glistening in her eyes but her voice steady. "For 58 years, he showed me every single day how much he loved me. Even toward the end, when talking was difficult for him, he would hold my hand and I could feel all his love flowing through that simple touch." The church bells began to ring in the distance, their melodious chimes carrying across the winter air. Charlotte looked up at the sound, remembering all the Christmas services she had attended here with her family. This year, the bells seemed to carry an extra message of hope and love, perhaps inspired by the unexpected friendship forming beside her. "Do you still have the memory box?" Charlotte asked gently. Margaret nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It sits on my kitchen table now. I look through it every morning with my cup of tea.
Arthur always said that memories are the one treasure that no one can ever take away from you.
As they walked, other members of the crowd had begun to notice the special attention Princess Charlotte was giving to Margaret. Many people were taking photographs and videos, but their cameras captured something far more meaningful than a typical royal walkabout. They were witnessing genuine human compassion in action, the kind of moment that reminded everyone why the royal family held such a special place in the hearts of their people. "Arthur sounds like a very wise man," Charlotte said thoughtfully. "My great-grandmother used to say something similar about memories. She told me that the people we love never really leave us as long as we carry their love in our hearts." Margaret stopped walking for a moment, overcome by the wisdom and kindness flowing from this 9-year-old princess. "Your great-grandmother was absolutely right, dear. And, if I may say so, you remind me so much of her. Not just in how you look, but in the way you make people feel valued and heard." Charlotte felt a warm glow at the comparison to Queen Elizabeth II. Her great-grandmother had been her role model and inspiration, and knowing that she was living up to that legacy meant everything to her. The bouquet of flowers in her hands seemed to grow more beautiful and meaningful with each step toward the church. Prince George and Prince Louis had been walking slightly ahead with their father, but they had slowed their pace to stay with the group. George, being older and more aware of royal protocol, understood the significance of what his sister was doing. Louis, still young and energetic, found himself fascinated by Margaret's walking stick and kept sneaking curious glances at it. "Mrs. Thompson," Catherine said warmly, "Charlotte has told us how much this Christmas walk means to you and how you used to come here with Arthur. We're so honored that you're sharing this tradition with us today." Margaret felt overwhelmed by the kindness being shown to her by the entire royal family. She had expected, at most, to catch a glimpse of them as they passed by. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined walking alongside them, having meaningful conversations, and feeling like she was part of their Christmas celebration. "Your Royal Highness," Margaret said to Catherine, "I must tell you how proud you should be of Princess Charlotte. In all my years, I've rarely met someone so young who shows such genuine care for others. Arthur would have absolutely adored her." Charlotte blushed slightly at the praise but continued to focus on making sure Margaret felt comfortable and included. She had noticed that Margaret was starting to breathe a bit harder from the walk, and she began looking for a place where they might rest for a moment. "Margaret," Charlotte said, "would you like to sit on that bench for a moment? The one under the oak tree? I'd love to hear more about what you and Arthur enjoyed most about these Christmas walks." The bench Charlotte had spotted was perfectly positioned to provide a brief rest while still keeping them on track to reach the church on time. It was also in a spot where Margaret could sit comfortably while still feeling part of the group rather than holding everyone back. As they approached the bench, Margaret gratefully accepted the opportunity to rest. Charlotte sat beside her, still carefully holding the bouquet of flowers, while Catherine and William positioned themselves nearby. The security team created a respectful perimeter that allowed for privacy while ensuring everyone's safety. "Arthur loved watching the children most of all," Margaret said as she caught her breath. "Every year, we would come early to get a good spot, and he would spend the entire time pointing out the young ones in your family. He was so proud of how well-behaved and kind they always seemed." Louis, overhearing his name mentioned, bounced over to where Margaret was sitting. His natural curiosity and charm had always been irresistible to adults, and Margaret was no exception. "Are you Charlotte's new friend?" Louis asked with the directness that only small children possessed. Margaret laughed, a sound filled with genuine delight. "I suppose I am, Your Royal Highness. And what a wonderful friend she is." Louis considered this seriously, then nodded his approval. "Charlotte is the best at making friends. She helped me make friends with the horses at the stable, and she taught me how to be gentle with butterflies in the garden." George, always the responsible older brother, stepped forward and extended his hand to Margaret in a perfect royal greeting. "It's very nice to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. Thank you for sharing your flowers with us." Margaret shook George's hand, marveling at his poise and maturity. "The pleasure is all mine, Your Royal Highness. You all remind me so much of your father and uncle when they were young. Arthur and I watched them grow up during these Christmas walks too." William smiled at the memory. "Mrs. Thompson, did you and Arthur attend the Christmas walks when Harry and I were children?" "Oh yes," Margaret replied, her eyes lighting up with the recollection. Arthur especially remembered the year Prince Harry decided to wave at absolutely everyone individually. "It took you ages to get to church that day, but Arthur said it was the most charming thing he'd ever seen." The family laughed at the memory, and Charlotte felt a deep satisfaction knowing that she was helping to create new happy memories for Margaret while honoring the old one she shared with Arthur. The princess understood instinctively that this was what Christmas was really about, bringing people together, sharing love and kindness, and making sure no one felt forgotten or alone. As they prepared to continue toward the church, Charlotte made a decision that would surprise everyone, including herself. She had been thinking about Margaret's story and about the memory box Arthur had made for her, and she wanted to do something special in return. "Margaret," Charlotte said carefully, "I have an idea, but I want to ask your permission first.
Would it be all right if I mentioned Arthur during our prayers today?
I'd like to ask for a special blessing for his memory and for you as you continue the traditions you shared together." Margaret's eyes filled with tears again, but these were tears of profound gratitude and joy. The thought that Princess Charlotte would include Arthur in the royal family's Christmas prayers was beyond anything she could have hoped for. "Oh, my dear child," Margaret whispered, "that would mean more to me than all the treasures in the world. Arthur always said that being remembered in prayer was the greatest honor anyone could receive." Charlotte squeezed Margaret's hand gently, then stood up and carefully helped the elderly woman to her feet. The gesture was small but significant, showing that Charlotte had learned not just the formal protocols of royal behavior but the deeper principles of respect and care for others. As they resumed their walk toward the church, Charlotte noticed that more and more people in the crowd were becoming aware of the special friendship that had developed. She could hear whispered conversations and see people pointing in their direction, but rather than feeling pressured by the attention, Charlotte felt proud. This was exactly the kind of moment that justified all the privileges and responsibilities that came with being a member of the royal family. The church was now clearly visible ahead of them, its ancient stone walls and beautiful stained glass windows promising warmth and peace. Charlotte could see other members of the extended royal family gathering near the entrance, all dressed in their Christmas finest. Soon, she would need to take her place in the formal procession into the church, but she wasn't ready to say goodbye to Margaret just yet. "Margaret," Charlotte said as they drew closer to the church after the service, "would you like to join us for tea? I mean, if you don't have other plans. I'd love for you to meet some of our other family members, and I think they would enjoy hearing your stories about Arthur and your years of Christmas walks." Margaret stopped walking again, this time from sheer amazement. An invitation to tea with the royal family was something that happened to other people in fairy tales or newspaper stories. It certainly didn't happen to ordinary widows who came to Christmas walks hoping only to feel a little less alone. "Princess Charlotte," Margaret said slowly, "are you certain? I wouldn't want to impose on your family's Christmas celebration." Catherine stepped forward with a warm smile. "Mrs. Thompson, it would be our absolute pleasure to have you join us. Charlotte is right, our family would love to hear more about your memories and about Arthur. Besides, Christmas is always better when it's shared with friends." As they approached the final stretch before the church, Charlotte realized that this unexpected encounter had taught her something important about what it truly meant to be a princess. It wasn't about wearing beautiful clothes or living in palaces or having people curtsy when they met you. Being a princess meant using whatever power and influence you had to make other people's lives a little brighter, a little more hopeful, a little more filled with love. The Christmas service at St. Mary Magdalene Church was everything Charlotte had hoped it would be and more. As the royal family took their traditional seats in the front pews, Charlotte made sure that Margaret was seated nearby in a place of honor usually reserved for distinguished guests. The princess had quietly spoken to church officials before the service began, explaining that Mrs. Thompson was a special friend who deserved recognition for her decades of faithful attendance at the Christmas walks. Margaret sat in the wooden pew, still hardly believing that she was inside the church as a guest of the royal family rather than watching from the crowd outside. The bouquet of flowers from her garden now rested in a place of honor on the altar, exactly as Charlotte had promised. Seeing her humble flowers displayed so prominently filled Margaret's heart with a warmth that had been missing since Arthur's death. During the opening hymn, Charlotte's clear young voice rang out with particular sweetness. She had always loved singing in church, but today her voice carried extra joy because she knew she was singing not just for her family and the congregation, but for Margaret and for the memory of Arthur. Every note felt like a small gift she could offer to honor the love story she had heard about during their walk. The rector, who had been conducting Christmas services for the royal family for many years, had been quietly informed about the special circumstances of Margaret's presence. During his sermon, he spoke about the importance of continuing traditions even in times of grief, about finding new ways to honor those we have lost, and about the unexpected angels who sometimes appear in our lives when we need them most. Charlotte listened to every word, feeling as though the sermon had been written specifically for this moment. She glanced over at Margaret and saw tears streaming down the elderly woman's face, but they were clearly tears of comfort rather than sorrow. For the first time since Arthur's death, Margaret felt truly connected to the Christmas spirit she had feared she might never experience again. When it came time for prayers, Charlotte had requested permission to offer a special prayer aloud. This was unusual protocol for a young member of the royal family, but the rector and her parents had agreed that the circumstances warranted this exception. Standing at her seat, Charlotte's voice carried clearly through the ancient church. "Dear God," Charlotte began, her young voice steady and sincere, "today we pray especially for Arthur Thompson, who loved Christmas and loved coming to these services with his wife Margaret. Please let Arthur know that his love continues to live on through Margaret's kindness and through the beautiful traditions they shared together. Help us all to remember that love never truly ends, it just finds new ways to shine in the world." The congregation was deeply moved by Charlotte's prayer. Many people wiped away tears, touched by the compassion and wisdom evident in such a young person. Margaret felt as though Arthur himself was present in that moment, approving of the friendship his beloved wife had formed with the young princess. After the service concluded, the royal family typically greeted a select group of local dignitaries and church officials before returning to Sandringham House. Today, however, Charlotte had other plans. She waited as the congregation filed out, then approached Margaret with an expression of determination and joy.
"Are you ready for tea?"
Charlotte asked, offering her arm to help Margaret navigate the church steps. "I can't wait for you to meet my grandparents and some of our cousins. They're going to love your stories." The walk back to Sandringham House took on a festive atmosphere as Margaret found herself surrounded by multiple generations of the royal family. King Charles, who had been informed about his granddaughter's new friendship, made a point of walking alongside Margaret and asking about her life in the local community. Queen Camilla shared stories about her own experiences losing loved ones and finding ways to honor their memories. "Mrs. Thompson," King Charles said warmly, "Charlotte tells me that you and your husband were faithful attendees of our Christmas walks for many years. We're deeply grateful for your loyalty and support, and we're delighted to finally have the chance to thank you properly." Margaret felt overwhelmed by the kindness being shown to her by the entire royal family. What had started as a day she had dreaded, her first Christmas walk without Arthur, had transformed into one of the most meaningful experiences of her entire life. As they approached Sandringham House, Charlotte pointed out various features of the estate that she thought Margaret would find interesting. The princess had learned from her great-grandmother that hospitality meant more than just providing refreshments, it meant making guests feel welcome and valued. "That's the garden where we grow vegetables for the kitchen," Charlotte explained. "And over there is where we keep the horses. Would you like to see them later? They're very gentle, and I think you'd enjoy meeting them." Margaret marveled at how natural and unspoiled Charlotte remained despite all the privilege surrounding her. The princess spoke about horses and gardens with the same genuine enthusiasm that any child might show when sharing their favorite places with a new friend. Inside the house, the formal drawing room had been prepared for afternoon tea, but Charlotte had requested that they use the smaller, more intimate family sitting room instead. She wanted Margaret to feel comfortable and relaxed, not overwhelmed by the grandeur that could sometimes intimidate visitors to royal residences. The sitting room was decorated for Christmas with a beautiful tree covered in ornaments that clearly held sentimental value. Many of them appeared to be handmade, including several that Charlotte and her brothers had obviously created during their younger years. Margaret was delighted to see that even the royal family treasured the imperfect but heartfelt decorations that children make. "That angel on top was made by Charlotte when she was 6, Catherine explained, noticing Margaret's interest in the tree. "She was so proud of it, and we've used it every year since then." Charlotte blushed slightly but looked pleased that her childhood creation was being highlighted. "It's a bit crooked," she admitted to Margaret, "but Mummy says that's what makes it special." "Handmade decorations are always the most beautiful," Margaret agreed. "Arthur and I had a tree full of ornaments we'd made together over the years. Looking at them every Christmas was like reviewing our entire life story." As tea was served, Charlotte made sure she sat next to Margaret so they could continue their conversation. The princess had discovered that she genuinely enjoyed talking with the elderly woman, finding her stories fascinating and her perspective on life both wise and comforting. "Margaret," Charlotte said as they enjoyed delicate sandwiches and Christmas cake, "what was your favorite Christmas tradition with Arthur? Besides coming to see us, I mean." Margaret's face lit up with remembrance. "Every Christmas Eve, Arthur would read me the story of the Nativity from his grandmother's old Bible. He had such a wonderful reading voice, and he would do different voices for all the characters. Even after 58 years of marriage, I looked forward to that reading every single year. Prince Louis, who had been quietly observing the conversation while enjoying his cake, suddenly perked up with interest. "Do you still have the special Bible?" he asked with the directness of childhood. "I do indeed," Margaret replied. "It's sitting on my mantelpiece at home. I tried reading it myself on Christmas Eve last year, but it just wasn't the same without Arthur's wonderful voices." Charlotte's mind began working quickly. She could see an opportunity to give Margaret something truly meaningful, something that would help her feel less alone during future Christmas celebrations. The princess had learned from watching her parents and grandparents that the best gifts weren't expensive items but gestures that showed you truly understood what someone needed. "Margaret," Charlotte said carefully, "would you like me to come and read with you this Christmas Eve? I mean, if that wouldn't be too strange. I couldn't do the voices as well as Arthur did, but I'd love to help you continue that tradition." Margaret's teacup rattled slightly in her saucer as her hands began to shake with emotion. The offer was so unexpected and so perfectly thoughtful that she could hardly process it. Princess Charlotte wanted to spend part of her Christmas Eve helping a lonely widow maintain a precious tradition. "My dear child," Margaret whispered, "that would be the most wonderful Christmas gift I could imagine. But surely you have your own family traditions on Christmas Eve. I couldn't ask you to give up time with your parents and brothers." Catherine, who had been listening to the conversation with growing admiration for her daughter's compassion, spoke up immediately. "Mrs. Thompson, our family would be honored to share Christmas Eve with you. In fact, why don't you come here for dinner that evening, and, afterwards, Charlotte can help you with the Bible reading. We could make it a new tradition." William nodded his agreement, proud of both his wife and daughter for their spontaneous kindness. "Margaret, our family has learned that Christmas is always more meaningful when it's shared with people who understand the true spirit of the season. You and Arthur clearly understood that spirit." King Charles, who had been quietly observing the entire interaction, leaned forward with interest. "Mrs. Thompson, I'd be curious to hear more about this Bible reading tradition. My own grandmother used to read to us from her Bible every Christmas, and those remain some of my most cherished childhood memories." As the conversation continued, Margaret found herself sharing stories not just about Arthur, but about their entire life together. She told them about their modest wedding during the post-war years, about the children they had hoped to have but were never blessed with, about how they had poured all their parental love into nieces and nephews and neighborhood children instead. Charlotte listened to every word, fascinated by the love story that had unfolded over nearly 6 decades. She was learning that true love wasn't just about the dramatic moments shown in movies and fairy tales, but about the daily choice to care for someone else, to share their joys and sorrows, to build a life together one small moment at a time. "Arthur sounds like he was an amazing husband," Charlotte said sincerely. "You were very lucky to find each other." "We were," Margaret agreed. "But, I think Arthur would say that the real luck was in learning how to keep choosing love every single day, even when things were difficult. Love isn't just a feeling, dear. It's a decision you make over and over again." These words struck Charlotte as particularly profound. Even at 9 years old, she could understand that Margaret was sharing something important about how to live a meaningful life. The princess filed this wisdom away in her heart, knowing instinctively that she would remember and value these lessons for years to come. As the afternoon progressed, other members of the royal family joined them in the sitting room. Princess Anne shared her own memories of longtime royal supporters, while Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall told amusing stories about their childhood Christmas experiences at Sandringham. Margaret found herself at the center of a warm, welcoming family gathering that felt nothing like the formal royal events she had watched from a distance for so many years. Charlotte noticed that as the hours passed, Margaret seemed to grow younger and more animated. The sadness that had been so evident in her eyes during the morning walk was being replaced by genuine joy and laughter. The princess felt a deep satisfaction knowing that she had played a role in bringing about this transformation. As the day began to wind down, Charlotte realized that she had one more surprise planned for Margaret. With her mother's help, she had arranged for something that she hoped would provide lasting comfort long after this magical day had ended. As the afternoon light began to fade over Sandringham, Charlotte knew the time had come for her final surprise. She had been planning this moment carefully throughout their time together, and she was both excited and nervous about Margaret's reaction. The princess had learned from her great-grandmother that the most meaningful gifts often came from the heart rather than from expensive stores. "Margaret," Charlotte said, taking the elderly woman's hand gently, before you go home today, there's something I'd like to give you.
Would you come with me to my room? There's something special I want to show you.
Margaret, who had already received more kindness and joy than she had experienced in months, felt curious about what other surprises this remarkable young princess might have in store. She followed Charlotte up the grand staircase of Sandringham House, marveling at the family portraits lining the walls and the obvious love that filled this historic home. Charlotte's bedroom was exactly what Margaret might have expected from a 9-year-old princess, beautiful but clearly lived in, with books scattered on the reading chair, artwork pinned to a bulletin board, and stuffed animals arranged on the bed alongside more formal decorative elements. It was the room of a child who was both royal and completely normal. "Please sit here," Charlotte said, guiding Margaret to the comfortable chair by the window.
"I'll be right back."
Charlotte disappeared into her walk-in closet, and Margaret could hear rustling sounds and quiet movements. After a few minutes, the princess emerged carrying a carefully wrapped package that was clearly quite precious to her. "This belonged to my great-grandmother," Charlotte began, her voice serious with the weight of what she was about to share. "She gave it to me just before she died, and she told me that someday I would know the right person to share it with." Margaret's eyes widened as Charlotte placed the package in her hands. Whatever was inside was clearly valuable, not necessarily in monetary terms, but in emotional significance. The elderly woman could feel the importance of this moment, and she was almost afraid to open the gift.
"Your great-grandmother left this for you?" Margaret asked softly. "Are you certain you want to give it away? Some things are too precious to share."
Charlotte smiled with a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. "Great-grandmother taught me that the most precious things become even more valuable when they're shared with people who will truly appreciate them. She said that keeping beautiful things locked away where no one can enjoy them is the saddest waste of all." With trembling fingers, Margaret carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was an exquisite leather-bound journal with pages edged in gold. The cover was embossed with a simple but elegant pattern of roses, and a ribbon bookmark marked a page near the beginning. When Margaret opened the journal, she discovered that it contained handwritten entries in Queen Elizabeth's distinctive script. "It's a memory journal," Charlotte explained softly. "Great-grandmother started writing in it during her early years of marriage to great-grandfather. She wrote down special moments, funny things that happened, lessons she learned, and thoughts about the people she loved. She told me that memories are too important to trust only to our minds because sometimes our minds forget, but written words last forever." Margaret carefully turned the pages, reading snippets of the late Queen's private thoughts and observations. The entries revealed a side of Queen Elizabeth that the public had rarely seen, a young wife learning to navigate marriage and motherhood, a woman who worried about making mistakes, who treasured small moments of happiness, and who understood that love was found in everyday gestures rather than grand proclamations. "This is incredible," Margaret whispered. "But, Princess Charlotte, this must be priceless.
It belongs in your family forever. I couldn't possibly accept something so precious."
Charlotte sat on the edge of her bed, facing Margaret directly. "Margaret, great-grandmother didn't give this to me so I could keep it on a shelf. She gave it to me because she trusted me to know when and how to use it properly. After listening to your stories today, I know that you understand exactly what this journal represents." The princess paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing with the explanation she had been rehearsing in her mind all afternoon. "You told us about the memory box Arthur made for you, and how looking through it every morning helps you feel connected to him," Charlotte said. "I thought that maybe you could use this journal to write down your own memories of Arthur. All those wonderful stories you shared with us today, and all the other special moments you haven't told anyone yet." Margaret felt tears beginning to flow again, but these were tears of overwhelming gratitude and awe. The thoughtfulness of this gift was beyond anything she could have imagined. Princess Charlotte hadn't just listened to her stories, she had truly understood their significance and found a way to honor them. "But there's more," Charlotte continued, her excitement growing as she explained her full plan. "I was thinking that maybe we could write in it together sometimes. When I come to read with you on Christmas Eve, we could add new entries about our friendship and about how Arthur's love continues to touch other people's lives through your kindness." The idea of creating new memories while honoring old ones struck Margaret as absolutely perfect. She could envision herself sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, carefully writing about the 58 years of love she had shared with Arthur. She could imagine Princess Charlotte visiting and adding her own thoughts about friendship and love and the lessons that different generations could learn from each other. "Princess Charlotte," Margaret said through her tears, "this is the most thoughtful gift I have ever received. You've given me a way to keep Arthur's memory alive while also creating space for new joy in my life.
I will treasure this always.
Charlotte beamed with satisfaction, knowing that her instincts about the perfect gift had been correct. But she wasn't quite finished with her surprises. Reaching into her desk drawer, she pulled out a beautiful fountain pen with a silver case. This pen belonged to great-grandfather, Charlotte explained.
Great-grandmother always said that important thoughts deserved to be written with a special pen. I'd like you to have it to use with the journal.
Margaret held the pen with reverence, understanding that she was being entrusted with family heirlooms of immense sentimental value. The weight of the pen felt substantial in her hand, and she could imagine the important documents and personal letters that had been written with this very instrument. There's one more thing, Charlotte said, her voice becoming slightly shy.
I wrote the first entry in the journal already. Would you like to read it?
Margaret carefully turned to the page marked with the ribbon bookmark and found Charlotte's neat handwriting filling the page. The entry was dated that very day and read, "Today I met Mrs. Margaret Thompson, who taught me what true love looks like." She and her husband Arthur shared 58 years of love, and even though Arthur is no longer with us, their love story continues to inspire everyone who hears it. Margaret came to our Christmas walk alone for the first time, feeling sad and lonely. But, by the end of the day, she had gained a new family who will make sure she never has to face Christmas alone again.
Great-grandmother always said that the best Christmas gifts are the people who come into our lives when we need them most.
Today, Margaret and I gave each other the gift of friendship. I hope someday I can love someone the way Margaret loved Arthur, and I hope someone will love me that much in return. Love never really ends, it just finds new ways to grow and spread to other people.
That's the most important lesson I learned today.
Margaret read the entry twice, overwhelmed by the wisdom and compassion evident in every carefully chosen word. This 9-year-old princess had somehow captured the essence of what had happened between them and transformed it into something profound and lasting. "Oh, my dear girl," Margaret said, pulling Charlotte into a gentle hug. "You have such a beautiful soul. Arthur would have absolutely adored you, and I know he would be so proud to see how his love story has touched your heart." Charlotte hugged Margaret back, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had made a real difference in someone's life. This had started as a traditional royal Christmas walk, but it had become something much more meaningful, a lesson in love, friendship, and the importance of reaching out to others who need comfort. "Margaret," Charlotte said as they prepared to return downstairs, "I want you to promise me something. Promise that you'll write in the journal regularly, not just about sad things or memories of Arthur, but about new experiences too. About our friendship, about the beautiful things you notice in your garden, about anything that brings you joy."
"I promise," Margaret replied solemnly. "And I want you to promise me something in return.
Promise me that you'll always remember how special you are, and how much good you can do in the world just by being yourself and caring about other people." As they walked back downstairs together, Charlotte felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had learned something important about what it meant to be a member of the royal family. It wasn't about the grand ceremonies or the beautiful clothes or the historic buildings. It was about using whatever privileges and opportunities you had to make other people's lives better. The royal family gathered to say goodbye to Margaret as her transportation arrived to take her home. What had been planned as a brief encounter during a traditional Christmas walk had transformed into an afternoon of deep connection and meaningful friendship. Everyone could see that both Charlotte and Margaret had been changed by their meeting.
"Mrs.
Thompson," King Charles said as he helped her into the car, "we hope you know that you will always be welcome here. Charlotte has made it clear that you are now part of our extended family, and we couldn't be happier about that." Margaret settled into the comfortable seat, clutching the precious journal and pen, still hardly believing that this magical day had actually happened. Through the car window, she could see Princess Charlotte waving goodbye with the same enthusiasm and warmth that had characterized their entire interaction. As the car pulled away from Sandringham House, Margaret reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred in her life in just one day. She had started the morning dreading her first Christmas walk without Arthur, feeling isolated and forgotten. She was ending the day with a new family who cared about her, a precious gift that would help her honor Arthur's memory while creating new joy, and plans for Christmas Eve that would begin a beautiful new tradition. Most importantly, she had met a young princess who had shown her that love never really dies, it just finds new ways to express itself in the world. Charlotte had demonstrated that even a 9-year-old could make an enormous difference in someone's life simply by paying attention, showing kindness, and understanding that everyone has a story worth hearing. That evening, Margaret sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and opened the journal to a fresh page. Using the special pen that had once belonged to King George VI, she began to write her first entry. Today an angel came into my life disguised as a 9-year-old princess. Princess Charlotte didn't just give me a few minutes of attention during a royal walkabout, she gave me hope, friendship, and a reason to look forward to Christmas again. Arthur always said that love creates more love, and today I saw exactly what he meant. The love Arthur and I shared for 58 years has somehow reached out and touched this remarkable child, and, through her kindness, it will continue to grow and touch other lives.
I am no longer a lonely widow.
I am Margaret Thompson, friend of the royal family, keeper of precious memories, and creator of new joy.
Life is still beautiful, even when it's different than we expected it to be.
Meanwhile, back at Sandringham, Charlotte was getting ready for bed with a heart full of satisfaction and joy. She had learned that the most meaningful Christmas gifts weren't things you unwrapped, but connections you made with other people. She had discovered that being a princess meant much more than wearing tiaras and attending formal events. It meant using your position to bring light into dark places and hope to hurting hearts. As she drifted off to sleep, Charlotte smiled thinking about Christmas Eve and the new tradition she would share with Margaret. She was already planning the other ways she could help her new friend feel connected and valued. Perhaps they could start a small reading group for other widows in the community. Maybe Margaret could help in the palace gardens, sharing her knowledge of flowers and plants. The possibilities were endless when you approached life with an open heart and a determination to serve others. The day that had started as a routine royal Christmas walk had become something extraordinary, a reminder that the most powerful force in the world is love expressed through simple acts of kindness, and that anyone, regardless of age or position, has the power to change someone else's life for the better.